What's up, guys? We're going to get into a little bit of a 6-port to turbo conversion, how to do it right. Not going to be turbo in the car right now. It's obviously convertible, the wide body, the Rocket Bunny we put on it a while ago. But we're going to get the intake manifold all set, stuff like that, and throttle body and all that good stuff, and the ECU upgrade. Basically to prepare for the 6-port to turbo swap. So what we're going to do here is we got a T2 intake manifold, S5. Your car's an S5 anyways, but anyways. So the first thing you got to do, well, besides clean this intake manifold up, which I did, this thing was black, is fill these in, both of them. There's no way around it. A lot of people will fill it with decon, or decon. We're going to kill mice. Well, that's always a good thing either way. But they fill it with epoxy and shit like that, and I don't like that because there is always a chance for that epoxy to come apart and fall in the engine and destroy it. So anyways, we're going to be TIG welding it in. And on top of it, instead of getting all the plugs and everything else, we're just going to TIG weld this. I pulled all the vacuum ports out already. We're not going to be using those anymore. The only one we're going to be using is this for the map sensor. So we're going to TIG these oil metering ones, these vacuum ports, the one on the end. I did have block off plates. They look like crap on here, so we're going to TIG weld both of these closed. This is the only block off plate we're going to have. I mean, if you wanted to, you could cut it all off, whatever, depending on how far you want to go, and then you TIG weld everything closed. Not everybody has access to a TIG welder. Best thing is find somebody that can have it filled in for you, and you're going to be way better off than filling it with epoxy and crap like that. So, and then we're going to get into the throttle body and everything else. So let me get into getting this welded closed, and then I'll show you where we go from there. So give me, well, instantly on here, but it's going to take me a good 20 minutes. So I will be right back. All right, it's been about 20 minutes later. I had to stop and let the torch cool off and stuff in between. But you can see what we got here. Got my glove on because it's still piping hot. So filled all this in with filler. That's what I was saying. And then filled all these vacuum ports and the other side here. So the whole idea that you have to fill this with filler is, let's see if I get this the right way. So you got your gasket here. I got to grind. You got to grind all this down. I'll put it on the flat planer afterwards and plane it off. But the reason why I like to fill this here and not do it with epoxy, as you can see, there's a lot in that port that's going to be filled with epoxy that can get in that port. So the biggest thing is after I plane it and stuff like that, I'm going to cut these ports out, and then it's going to match up to the 6-port. No issues whatsoever. Just make sure you round these off nice. Don't leave a sharp edge and stuff like that. So let me get this planed off and cleaned off, and then I'll show you exactly where we're at. All right, we're to the next update on this thing. And so here we are. We're all ported. Nice and smoothed off. I don't know if it'll focus. And like I said, when you're doing this side, you got to cut it in at an angle pretty good. If not, you'll cut right through the side of the intake manifold. So basically that's what you end up with. Put the gasket on. If I can line it up here and not be all sorts of messed up. So you line it up. The gasket's always a little bit bigger than the actual holes. But that's pretty much what you end up with, and then you're going to be able to bolt that onto your 6-port engine and have your Turbo 2 intake manifold. So now onto this. That's got to come off. We're going to be running an idle air control valve. That vacuum port's getting plugged along with like 4 of those. So we only need one for fuel pressure regulator. Later on a blow-off valve, and that's pretty much it on the front of that. And then for the throttle body, I take everything out, take the secondary butterflies out, And I will use a tap and pull those brass fittings out of there. And then there's a vacuum port there. I'll be TIG welding all those closed as well, which is going to clean this throttle body up pretty good, and intake manifold, and then you have less chances for vacuum leaks and stuff. So let me get onto that and we'll be right back. All right, we brought our junk inside, started pulling some of the parts out of it to get prepared for this. We're going to do a lot more than just the intake manifold and stuff. We're going to do our battery relocation, electric power steering, new radiator, fans, hoses, all that good stuff. But where we left off on the intake manifold, we got a little carried away. Shaved everything off of it, and there's normally a dimple in here, so we're going to come in and open that up. As you can see, that's got that dimple, blocks flow a little bit. And like I said, on the throttle body, we removed everything, TIG welded it all closed, TIG this all smooth, shaved it, and we got rid of I still got to TIG these in, no big deal, but we only have to have that vacuum port and that vacuum port, because we have the map sensor underneath, and then that's the ECU we're going to be putting in. And we're going to go over a few things that everybody seems to have an issue with when they're upgrading or going to a carburetor or anything. We're going to bypass the ballast for the fuel pump, and we're going to wire it into the stock spit it out relay under the dash, because we're not going anything crazy with this, so we're not going to rewire the fuel pumps and all that right now. And I'll show you how to do that, because these cars do not pump fuel if there's no mass airflow sensor in the stock format, because the wiring actually comes out of the mass airflow over here, back, triggers the relay, and it actually won't even pump until you're cranking the car. So we'll show you how to do all that too. So let me get tearing everything out of this intake manifold, wiring harness, everything. And all right, got this stuff ripped out and got a little carried away. It'd be nice if I had somebody to film too, but and then I could pretty much show what's going on. So all this stuff is gone, and all that stuff, had to pull the wiring out. So right now we got a lot of stuff mocked up. We cleaned the engine bay up and all that stuff. As you remember in the earlier video, that was all rust and everything. So we went through, cleaned it up, redid this stuff, redid the coolant tubes, stuff like that, just to clean it up. I mean, it'd be one thing if we were pulling the engine out, but we're not. Not until we want to refresh it, and we'll probably end up doing a half bridge port on it and going from there. And then made up a fan shroud and stuff like that for the radiator. You always want a shroud. You don't want to just zip tie the fan to it. And then move the fuse box back there. So mocking up wise, to do your Turbo 2 intake manifold, you're going to need a few things. First is going to be, you're going to need the fuel rails off of the Turbo 2 as well. Right now I'm just running green Rx7 primary injectors off of Series 2, and I'll be either running blue or browns in the top rail. They're 600 cc's over the, I think it's 540s in this, or 480s or something like that. I think 540s, if my brain works correctly here. And the other thing too is I'm probably going to end up switching over to full function engineering trigger wheel. Just you get a lot of drift with those. So the other things, like I said, battery relocation, need some angle iron. And besides getting everything torn out of here, I forgot, we got everything torn out of here right now, the gauge cluster and all that stuff. And I'll show you a few tricks of what we're doing with this gauge cluster with the new ECU as well. For the battery and the convertibles, we're going to be sticking the battery right here. All the room in the day. Then the angle iron's just going to get, well, I got to grind this off and then weld it here, and up here. And we'll actually have the battery hold down. And then run the wiring up, which is going to go to the starter, from the starter to the alternator in the fuse box. And you also want to put a breaker in back there too, in case something shorts out. So on to other things with this. A lot of people like to mount the ECU in the glove box, on firewall, floor, dashboard, where the radio is. I don't understand why. The factory location is perfectly fine to mount your ECU. I've done it with all my Microtechs, everything else. You just take the ECU off of this bracket. There's already 2 holes there. The Adaptronic actually bolts right to the stock bracket. And then you're going to have the cover that goes over it, everything else. Amazing. And then you got easy access. So you come up here and put a hole in the firewall right behind the HVAC and run your wiring up. Instead of coming up, round, loop it into the engine bay, across the engine, you know, from the strut tower over. So when you go to turbo it, you know, you got to do heat management on your wires, so you're melting them. But yeah, there's no point in reinventing the wheel. Put the ECU where the stock ECU was. Amazing. Everything's got holes to run the wiring out and stuff like that. And then when it's mounted there, when you pull the harness out and you strip it back, because you're going to need to, because your wipers run through that harness, you have this connector right here. And guess what? There is your ignition power for your injectors, your ECU, all that was originally factory, that does not shut off when you crank the car over, because that's the other thing, is finding a circuit that does not kill power when you're cranking these cars over. And, you know, the trigger wheel power, everything. Mac valve, when you go to do boost control, stuff like that. It's right here. Black and yellow, black and white wires. Real simple. Then your grounds are already there. Hook into your grounds. It doesn't get any simpler. I don't know why everybody's got to try and mount ECUs in the glove box and everywhere else. It makes absolutely zero sense. And then it's protected with a cover afterwards. I mean, that simple. And then, excuse me, one other thing we had to do, because this car was automatic, and if you have an automatic, you're going to run into the same thing. We changed the tack out. The original one has the hold. It'll flash nonstop to the end of life. And it also is a lower red line on the automatics as well. So that's just 4 screws in the back, 2 screws in the front, and just pull the tack out, because you probably don't want to change your mileage or anything like that. So the other thing that I failed to say while we were in here is, even if you're going to be running NA for a short period of time, like we will be with this, you also got to take your oil filler neck out, because it's going to come right through the center of this. And you either need a Turbo 2 one or a Modify one or whatever. This one's modified. And then you actually take this stock part off the NA and the intake tube. And then you can just put a cone filter on the end of it right here for now. Simple, simple, simple. Everybody overthinks this, doing this stuff and everything else. But let me tear into this, get the battery mounted. I gotta get some power up, and then I'll show you the powering and the bypass on this. We're also tucking the harness, so you're not going to have, this is what it's going to look like. Nice and clean, real easy to do. But we'll get to bypassing that or the ballast, fuel pump ballast, and wiring into the stock relay under the dash. So, battling this cold, I don't know if you heard it earlier in the video, so it's been a few days, and go over some of the stuff so you guys know. It's pretty simple. So you're wiring an ECU, Heltec, whatever. Normally, well, you'd come up, yellow and blue wire. You can look up the pinups, and that'll be the tack. Normally, I splice in on the Series 4 to the speed sensor, but I'll show you the deal with this on the Series 5 after. And then this is for the clutch pedal ground trigger. This car was automatic, so it never had the clutch pedal. I put one in, and basically with that wired into the ECU, you can do no lift shift and stuff like that. So that way I can get this buttoned back up and back in with the stuff. But like I said, we mounted the battery back here. Just a couple pieces of angle iron down there, and that stock bracket I bent just a little bit to hold it in, and we're mounted back here. It's not going anywhere at all. Famous last words, but that is definitely not going anywhere. It's just welded into the floor. And yeah, so I just gotta put 2 spades on that, hook it to the clutch pedal switch, got the tack wire ran. Now coming back over, so everybody knows, you can look up pinups on these, pinouts, I mean. The factory fuel pressure, or not fuel pressure, fuel pump relay is under here. Probably can't see in there. I'll get a better shot at it earlier. If you're not going crazy and rewiring your fuel pump relay for now, like we're not in this. So you come over, and in this main harness, that's the one that's running the tack and stuff. It comes down, you have your fourth plug to the ECU. So you look at your pinouts, you can grab your regular ignition power is right there, black with white. That'll go to the ECU. Yellow with blue stripe, that's the check engine light, which the Adaptronic will throw a check engine light if there's issues, so that'll get pinned in. And then the blue wire, they're all pinned on that last plug, is your speed sensor. So when we go farther down the road with this, with the turbo, we can do boost per gear. And then I have to look, it was one of these three, I believe it was blue with yellow stripe. I was going to wire into the old ignition coil wires, but I'm going to be doing something a little different there. Coil on plug, I'll show you how I do that later. But one of these three, I got to look it back up, is your fuel pump relay trigger, which will go right to the ECU and you're done. So that's all powered. And then I have the Innovate wideband ready to hook up, which serial into the ECU is right there, which is to be able to pin in. And then the ECU is the wideband, power and ground. So like I said, on that other harness that you pull out, the engine harness, you have your plug up here, and that's your power for your fuel injectors and everything else. So it's all right there, ready to go. It's already fused, all that good stuff. And then you have your oil pressure for your gauge, which is your yellow and white wire, which will get pulled back through the other way because we're not running it over the top of the engine anymore. And then you got a couple other signals in there that you can tie into if you want to. I just haven't gotten that far yet. So everything's right there to plug in. Nice and easy. No issues, like I was saying. That's why I said mount the ECU right where the factory was, and you can already go. If you're using the stock leading and trailing coils, you literally have your 3 trigger wires here to plug in, and you're done. So, and the same thing is the crank position sensor wiring comes in, you can wire it to it just like that. No running a bunch of new wires. You already have a nice shielded factory wire with ground. So let me get some of this stuff back together, because this is a disaster right now with parts everywhere, and that bothers me because you look at these plastic pieces and they'll break. Other than that, getting a little farther with this, get all that stuff painted up. Radiator, I have to move up just a pinch more, sandblast those brackets and get them in. I made a new bracket in the fuse box, is actually literally sitting there now, and I got to repaint it up, but we put a spot for a ground to come over to the engine, just a little shorty, and then we'll get more into that wiring after, and still have to get into the wiring for that bypass with the speed deal for the I can't, my brain is not functioning with this cold, for the ballast resistor here, and we'll get into that when I get back. All right, before I forget, that fuel pump resistor. So basically you're gonna have your connector, this is gonna be under the headlight, obviously right here. You take it off, flip it over. I already cut it, did everything. Pull the 2 pins out of the center of the connector. You're gonna have your red and yellow wire, and then your 2 black from the resistor. All you're gonna do is loop those together like so. And I have this pulled through, so it's not gonna, whatever. So basically it would be over there, but right now it's pulled through, and then click it back in, done. You can just tape them up, whatever. But that's the fuel pump resistor. Before I forget, I already have quite a bit. Anyways, so got the electrical all hooked back up. Ran from the alternator over, all that's tucked away nicely. So now I'm really getting to the point where I have to dig into this intake manifold a little more and make the bracket for the throttle cable, which I'll go over with you guys too. Maybe I'll put in some of the ECU wiring stuff, maybe not. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. 4 injectors, coolant temp sensor, stuff like that. I will go into what connectors under the dash a little more when we're there to hook up the rest of the stuff. So I will be back. Well, it'll be tomorrow for me. It'll be instantly for you. Okay, so it's the next day, and This video is getting kind of long, so we're going to kill it here after this part. While I was talking about doing something a little bit different with the coils, and I'm doing coil on plugs with Rx7 coils. Real simple. Did it on the FC a while ago. It's worked out great. So figured I'd do it on this now that we got the Heltec. I mean, not the Heltec, the Adaptronic, and we can actually control the ignition with direct fire coils and not mess around with stuff that's not designed for the car, you know, and control the timing properly. But real simple, just Rx7 coils. Found some boots for it. Big long bolt. Basically tubing, fits perfectly on the bolt. Some washers, a couple pieces of angle iron, drilled the holes, and that's basically what we end up with on here. And real simple. Wiring's real easy. Power, ground, signal to each one, and that'll tie that up. So anyways, we'll come back in the next video on this, because mostly this is all prepped now. I got to finish up the intake manifold, and then we'll go over all the rest of the stuff that you need to do if you're going to turbo it. You know, like the oiling lines and stuff like that we'll go over. And yeah, there's a few other things that we'll have in the other video, and we should have it going by then. And yeah, we're not super far off right now. I got to do a couple brackets on the radiator. It's sitting a little too low. Bring it up, and then do a bunch of wiring. Figure we're probably already 20 minutes in on this video. So yeah, we're going to end it here. Stay tuned for the next one. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.